very, very tech challenged. And thanks to my good friend Becky, I made it here last year because she taught me how to read the tweet that came that told me about 140 conference last year, or I wouldn't have even had it loaded on my computer or my phone. I also had it loaded on my work computer for Facebook and Twitter or Facebook and Twitter on my phone and my computer for my work, because they like me to do it for clients and things like that. But today, the reason I'm so nervous, as Becky said, is I'm not talking about work, which I do frequently. I speak at a lot of places for my work and tell about rural enterprises where I work and our programs and our services. But this is the first time I've ever talked about this subject, so please bear with me and be patient with me, because not only am I tech challenged, but I'm talking about something new to you. April 2010, I was working for Rural Enterprises. My husband had been activated with the Air Force Reserves and was in Guam serving the Pacific. My son, Josh, was a junior in high school, active, normal, busy. Did I mention busy? On April 15th, life was pretty normal. I was headed off to a busy day of work. Josh was headed to school. The only thing unusual was Josh and his church youth group were going to Oklahoma City that evening to a concert they had been planning for several months. Now, we live 2.5 hours northwest, as Becky's told you several times, in small towns. I live in Cherokee. She lives over there in really Hopeton. She keeps saying Alva. And everyone assures me that Josh was having a great time at the concert. It was Rockin' Worship Roadshow with many different performers, and at this time, he was dancing along to Family Force 5, if any of you have heard of that, to a song called Earthquake, when all of a sudden, he dropped to the floor, literally dead of cardiac arrest. Thankfully, his story doesn't end there. A nurse who was walking by because she was pregnant, headed to the restroom, started CPR on Josh. Quickly, a paramedic who was kept on staff at the Ford Center also came, and she put an AED on Josh. And although neither one of them were able to get him to regain consciousness, they did get a heart rhythm back. An ambulance that was also already called to the Ford Center because of another emergency was diverted to Josh because his was a greater emergency, and he was very quickly taken to a nearby hospital where he was given much, much greater life support than they were giving him. By the time I reached Josh, as I said, it's a 2.5-hour drive. Our phones were ringing, buzzing, dinging, both his and mine, with every kind of message you can imagine: Facebook, Twitter, voicemails, every kind. I was panicked by the time the doctors explained to me what was going on, that my husband was going to get a message in Guam of some kind on Facebook or something before I had a chance to tell him what had happened to our son. This really is how my experience with Facebook began. After I notified my husband what was going on, I sent out my first truly mass text message and mass Facebook posting of Josh's status. Many of his friends back in Cherokee didn't even know if he was alive or if he was dead. I sent pictures of him laying in the hospital bed with tubes from almost every part of his body. A couple days later, when they started to take some of the tubes out, I sent pictures of that too, of him resting peacefully, but he still hadn't regained consciousness. A few days later, when he finally did regain consciousness, I sent pictures once again. And every time, mass messages came in. Facebook postings, people praying, people encouraging, Twitter messages, constantly. And it was very helpful because instead of me having to answer hundreds of phone calls, I could just push a button once or twice and send out some mass messages to all these people who continue to pray and encourage. When Josh finally regained consciousness, we quickly discovered his hands didn't work, his feet didn't work, he couldn't walk, he couldn't feed himself, and unfortunately, his speech and his understanding was also way below his age level. He had a serious brain injury from the time that he had went without oxygen while they were doing CPR on him and until they got the heart rhythm back and got him on equipment. If you're from a small town, you understand how fast news travels, and that's why I had been concerned. Good news, bad news, it doesn't matter. It travels one way or another. And that's why I had been worried about my husband knowing and started this path on social media. But sometimes it's good things too. About this time, as I was posting and asking, please start praying for Joshua as we discovered these problems, a good friend of ours posted on her Facebook for every one of her friends to start praying for Joshua because of the new problems. Right after that, I got a phone call from one of her friends, someone I had never met. You see, she was friends with my friend, but I hadn't met her. But we came to discover after she called me, it was her daughter-in-law who did CPR on my son at the concert and saved his life that first moment. Later, they came to meet him in the hospital, and once he regained consciousness, they met him, and we're all Facebook friends, and they keep up with him, and of course, still pray for him. The IMSA crew that took Josh to the first hospital and later moved him to the second hospital at their request also gave us their phone numbers and later became Facebook friends, and still, to this day, we all keep touch with each other because they want to follow Josh's life. On day 3 of what I began to call Josh's dance, that's when those tubes came out. That's when we found Brianna Limpkin, the one who had done CPR. It was about 2 weeks later, channels 4 and 9 in Oklahoma City, they ran news stories on Joshua's attack, what had happened to him, and the disease he was eventually diagnosed with. That night, Josh received a strange friend request from someone we didn't know, and it was a man, not a kid his age. I have taught him to be a little careful about those things, as we've discussed some here today. He asked me about it, and we looked, and the thing that caught our attention was the man had posted, "I've seen the dead rise." As we looked closer, that man and his daughter and her youth group were also at that concert, and they had stood in circle and prayed around Joshua, and they thought he was dead until a little over 2 weeks later, they had seen these newscasts and seen that he was still alive. The daughter had refused to believe that he could be dead and had continued to pray all that time for Josh in hopes that he might be still alive. The dad had already given up and was sure he was dead. So it was a great faith builder for that family, and they had found us on Facebook, and we're still friends through them. And another twist to that is through Becky. We have a Twitter friend that we have tweet-ups with in Alva that's a mutual friend with them. So the social network friends are very small, and the paths cross. Josh's rehab doctor eventually even started to judge his rehab based on him and how he used the phone, because it didn't take long before he was taking all of our phones, pushing the buttons, and trying to send text even when he couldn't make any sense of what he was doing because he was so used to texting and doing Facebook. And within weeks, and especially by the end of the 6 and 7 weeks of intensive rehab, he was able to push the buttons and send them, and that's how we judged his rehab, and he was doing better. His doctor was very impressed and said it was one of his first patients that he had judged in this way, that he was getting better. I could actually stand here for hours and tell you many stories of how social media impacted us, how technology impacted us, including the implantable defibrillator that's about the size of a silver dollar that's in Josh's chest now that allows him to lead a fairly normal life. But instead, I'll just end letting you know that he graduated from high school in May with honors, and that on August the 20th, only 16 months after he actually literally dropped dead of cardiac arrest, he started the college of his dreams, OBU in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and continues to amaze his parents, his family, his friends, as he leads the miracle of his second life. Thank you all very much.